When we think of the Second World War, we think of invasions, of battles, tanks, but also to war on humanity, think of the death camps. But did you know that many people in World War II died because of starvation? Think of the Soviet people in the German-controlled territories and previously at the hands of their leaders. The Dutch at the end of World War II, and the Greeks, an estimated 250,000 Greeks, died in the Great Famine. In this video, you will learn the tragic story of the Greek famine of World War II. Keep watching. In April 1941, the German invasion of Greece began. Simultaneously, the Germans invaded Yugoslavia as well. The German divisions attacked from Bulgaria, crushing through the northern Metaxas line as Thessaloniki was taken on April 9th. Greek forces fighting in Albania found themselves surrounded. Other Greek defenders hurled back in panic. It gave the Allied troops little time to prepare their defenses as they were pushed back by the Germans. On the 27th of April, the Germans entered Athens and the swastika flag was raised on the Acropolis. The surrender document was signed on the 23rd of April 1941 in Thessaloniki. It was signed by a Greek general, Georgios Tsolakoglou. He had capitulated without Athens' orders. Reasons he wanted to come to terms with the Germans was that he did not want the Italians to overrun his country. As soon as the Germans invaded Greece, looting began. One informant wrote, "The Germans have been living off the country. They brought no food for the troops with them and no soldiers' messes. The troops simply ate in restaurants. The troops were not in camps to avoid bombing, but in private houses. Many were thoroughly looted. Apart from private looting, also large-scale requisitioning occurred, as well as expropriation. As a result, unemployment increased and industrial output decreased." Because of the war, the harvest of 1941 was 15 to 30% lower than it should have been. Normally, foodstuffs were collected in the surplus areas, brought to the cities, and from there distributed to the deficit areas. And to make matters worse, the Axis, they threw up roadblocks and confiscated much of the food. So even if farmers wanted to help their fellow countrymen, it simply didn't happen since the Axis soldiers requisited much of what went via the roadblocks. But there was more. Hyperinflation. Because of the German economic policies in Greece, or basically the lack thereof, hyperinflation occurred, and many farmers sold their surplus grain privately on the black market. The black market flourished at that time. Prices rose steadily, fueled by the money printed to cover the demands of the occupation authorities. Inflation led producers and retailers to withdraw their goods from the market, and hoarding became widespread. Demobilized army officers sent by the Tsolakoglou government often sided with the farmers, who did not believe the food would go to their fellow countrymen. Private initiatives such as soup kitchens sprung up, but as the Red Cross stated, no organization of public assistance or social welfare could have managed to save all those who suffered from the famine. Queues appeared in front of shops, lines got longer and longer. People brought chairs with them to sit on while waiting for food. More beggars appeared on the streets. People started to cook grass. Axis plenipotentiaries, they warned about the situation, but Hitler had no interest in solving it. By now it was June 1941, and Hitler had his eyes on the USSR as Operation Barbarossa was about to kick off. The Germans did do some half-heartedly attempt to alleviate the situation, but it didn't do much, and they basically asked the Italians to fix it, but the Italians couldn't fix it. By autumn, the Germans had lost interest in the situation, and from that point on, no more food was brought from the Reich to Greece. When Reichsmarshal Hermann was informed about the situation, he replied as follows: "I could not care less when you say that Greek people under your administration are dying of hunger. Let them perish, so long as no German starves." And that's what happened. When the first winter approached, Germans in the Reich enjoyed the same food consumption as before, while thousands of Greeks died of starvation. Children searched through rubbish bins for scraps of food. Others hurled around restaurants. Some Germans found this amusing. Some German officers tormented urchins by throwing them scraps from balconies and watching them fight among themselves. Soldiers eating olives in the streets attracted a crowd of children. As soon as one spat out an olive stone, the children rushed for it. The fastest would put it in his mouth and suck it clean. The summer was very hot and dry. The following winter became very cold. Snow began to fall in Athens. Wood and coal had become unaffordable by now, so many Greek houses were unheated, and many Greeks perished because of sickness. Also, mental and physical exhaustion set in, to a point that people simply collapsed on the streets of the city. Here is what happened to a Greek ex-serviceman. He had fought on the Albanian front and he came from the islands, but after the German takeover, he was unable to return. He collapsed in Athens. Somebody urged him to get up and he replied, "My God, why have you brought me to such a state? Why am I not at home instead of crawling like a dog through the streets at night? Why, my God, what did I do to you?" An estimated 250,000 Greeks died because of the famine. So did the Germans use a strategy of deliberate starvation? According to Mark Mazower, who wrote the book Inside Hitler's Greece, this was not the case. It was pure economic plunder and mismanagement. At the height of the famine, the Germans were still exporting food from Greece. So did the Italians, although the Italians were more willing to help. The Axis powers blamed the British because of the blockade. The Vatican urged the British to lift the blockade, and the British on their turn blamed the Italians. A plan to import food via Turkey did not work out. Finally, in the summer of 1942, the British lifted the blockade, and the food situation in Greece improved immediately. So whose fault was it really? What are your thoughts on that? Leave it in the comments below the video. I want to thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more about Greece's history during World War II, I have a video for you. It's right here. You can have the full story. You can support me on Patreon and PayPal. And best wishes from the Plaka here in Athens, in Greece.